Hey there, students. This is a screencast on part 4 of your PEPP. Now we're looking at the approach and the questions and how we are assessing those questions. So really now we had our focus area and we want to look at how are we going to evaluate that focus area. So if I'm looking at the inclusive practices of a preschool special needs classroom, I might be looking at how often are the students with their typical peers. Is there a collaboration with general education? I might be looking at even how least restrictive environment is decided and written up in the IEP meeting. And so all of those things might be my questions. Let's go straight to the template. This part, you really don't have a lot of paragraphs and you don't have too much narrative. What you're going to do is to create a table for each question and or assessment measure. So I just gave an example here. Is the PBIS Tier 1 program at ABC school implemented with fidelity? So the first thing I would need to know, even before getting into this, is what does that mean with fidelity? How was the program written? So, first things first, I need to figure out how the program was actually designed. And, are we supposed to be doing experiences every single month, celebrations every month? Um, how are students getting points to go to the party? Is the party for everyone or just students who get PBIS tokens or points? So, anyhow, does each classroom do it differently? Or do we have a school-wide approach? There's so many questions I could ask. So one thing I might do is a teacher survey. Why am I doing a teacher survey for this? So I need to have some rationale here. Well, maybe my survey is, it needs to be regarding fidelity. So are we celebrating PBIS every single month? Are we, how do we decide which students get to go to this celebration and which students don't? Maybe in the beginning the program was designed for students to go to a jump park or have an experience, a party every month. But maybe now it's kind of turned into them getting candy or Happy Meal toys because funding has dropped. So with that funding, maybe with less funding, we are not celebrating every single month. We're celebrating every other month or once a semester. So you need to look at, in this situation, what is that program supposed to look like? And are we conducting with fidelity? So my rationale for the teacher survey is to see what's really happening. So the teachers are on the front line. They know what's happening with this PBIS program. So what's really happening? My question might be, how often are we having PBIS celebrations? What are the celebrations or what are the parties or what are the students getting? So if it was supposed to be that they earn school bucks or school tokens, are we doing that? So anyway, that would be my survey rationale. Validity. So is the survey actually asking what it's supposed to ask? So is my survey asking about what kind of food is in the cafeteria? Or is my survey asking about the fidelity of PBIS? Maybe I'm looking at fidelity, but my question is asking teacher perception, like how do they like it? I mean, I think that question is legit. What do they think about the PBIS Tier 1 program? But is it really asking the question about fidelity? Reliability. So usually a survey, if it's a Likert type scale, like a 1 to 5, reliability means two observers are seeing the same thing. um, Usually surveys are reliable because when we analyze those data, it's just mean scores. It's the average is a 3.5 out of 5. But if you have open-ended responses on that survey, I might analyze those open-ended responses differently than another evaluator. So that's when reliability can come into question. Bias. If I'm the creator of this PBIS Tier 1 program, I might not ask the hard questions. Whereas if I'm someone who doesn't have, a dog in the fight, I might ask questions that really may expose this Tier 1 program. I'm sure as a teacher, you've taken a survey before and you're like, well, that didn't really ask me what it needed to ask me. It's like, was that webinar helpful? And the questions are like, did you attend? Did the presenter show up? How long did it last? And you're like, okay, I thought I was taking a survey on if this webinar was helpful or meaningful, but I'm just being asked questions that have nothing to do with helpfulness. And now I just took this survey, and now I'm even more frustrated that that webinar was not helpful because the survey was not helpful. So who designs the survey matters. What I'd love for you guys to do is to try to find something that someone else has done, not like another school district necessarily, but a researcher. There's a ton of co-teaching surveys. There's probably some PBIS surveys out there as well. So unless you're doing something just very, very specific, it's always a good idea to try to find a valid instrument out there. So when you look at I give you guys a um, example of an early learning center program evaluation. We used interviews, observations, checklists, multiple tools, because you can't just evaluate using one tool. And that checklist that we used is a valid tool. And so my interview questions were not valid and possibly not necessarily reliable. They were not biased because I didn't work at that early learning center and I didn't have a bias on them. I was a neutral evaluator. But it's a good idea for some of your measures to be valid because your observation may not be valid, but your checklist or your surveys might be. Okay, so again, you're going to have probably multiple questions. This is just an example. And if I were to have used the same question, but have a different assessment tool, I'm going to start a new survey and talk about, okay, now I want to do observation, or now I want to do interview, but I still just have this one question. All right, so maybe you have more than one question. You should definitely have more than one tool or measure. And I'd love for you to also attach, it says it right here, one of your measures. Okay, so whether it's a measure you created yourself or a measure you found in the research literature or on a website. Okay, so that is part 4. The rubric ask exactly what we asked for in the template and in the directions, but it's got a little bit more information on how to reach the 4 points. Students do quite well in this section, except for sometimes they get validity and reliability confused. So definitely look into what those mean. And then assessment bias, what we're really talking about is bias of the tool, not bias of the people taking the tool. So if I am doing a focus group and I think my participants are biased, I'm not really talking about the participants being biased. I'm talking about my questions being biased. All right, so you guys have 2 weeks to complete part 4. You're going to do amazing. Have a great rest of your week.